Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that one tiny strip of ocean has just shut down the global economy. Gas prices explode, stock markets crash. World leaders rush into emergency meetings. And the scary part? This entire crisis begins in a place most people have never even heard of. A narrow waterway called the Strait of Hormuz. But why is this small passageway so dangerous? And why do military experts believe one mistake here could trigger a global crisis overnight? The answer is more complicated and more terrifying than you think. Look at a world map. Now zoom into the Middle East. Between Iran and Oman lies a narrow strip of water only about 21 miles wide. That's it, just 21 miles separating stability from chaos. But this tiny waterway carries something the modern world cannot survive without. Oil, every single day. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Think about that for a second. 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil on Earth moves through this one narrow channel. And it's not just oil. Massive tankers carrying natural gas from Qatar also pass through here. This waterway fuels cars in the United States, powers factories in China, and heats homes across Japan. In other words, if this narrow passage closes, the entire world feels it immediately. But here's the disturbing part. Closing it might actually be easier than you think, and that's where things start to get dangerous. Most people imagine wars starting with huge invasions. But in the Strait of Hormuz, a crisis could start with something much smaller. Just a few naval mines, or a handful of missiles fired from the coast. Because ships passing through the strait have almost no room to maneuver. The shipping lanes are only 2 miles wide in each direction. Picture massive oil tankers, some longer than the Empire State Building. Now imagine them trying to dodge missiles in a narrow corridor. It would be chaos. And one country in particular has spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. Iran controls the northern side of the strait, and its military strategy focuses heavily on disrupting this waterway if conflict ever erupts. Fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, underwater mines. It's what military analysts call asymmetric warfare. A weaker force using geography to threaten a much stronger one. But here's where things become even more complicated, because the United States is already deeply involved in protecting this passage, and that creates a very dangerous standoff. But before we get to that, there's something most people completely misunderstand about this strait, something that could make a crisis spread far beyond the Middle East, and that's where the real global risk begins. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a shipping route. It's one of the most heavily militarized waterways on Earth. On one side sits Iran. On the other side, naval forces from multiple countries patrol the region, including the United States Navy. The U.S. maintains powerful fleets nearby to keep the passage open. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, surveillance aircraft. Their mission is simple: make sure oil keeps flowing. But when two heavily armed forces operate this close together, mistakes can happen. A radar misunderstanding, a warning shot, a drone entering restricted airspace. History shows that sometimes wars don't start intentionally. They start because someone misreads the situation. And in a place as tense as the Strait of Hormuz, even a small incident could spiral out of control. But what would actually happen if the strait closed? The answer is where things start getting scary. If the Strait of Hormuz suddenly shut down, the impact would be immediate. Oil prices could skyrocket overnight. Some experts estimate prices could jump above $150 per barrel within days. Gas prices in the United States could surge. Stock markets might panic. Airlines would face massive fuel costs. And countries that rely heavily on imported oil would scramble to secure supplies. But the biggest danger isn't just economic, it's political. Because energy shortages often trigger international conflicts. Countries begin competing for limited supplies. Alliances shift, military tensions rise. Suddenly, a small waterway between Iran and Oman becomes the center of global power politics. But here's the twist most people don't realize. Even if the strait closed, the world wouldn't run out of oil immediately. So why would the situation still be so dangerous? The answer has nothing to do with oil itself. It has to do with fear. The real danger of the Strait of Hormuz isn't just the oil, it's the reaction. Global markets run on confidence. The moment investors believe supply might be disrupted, prices surge. Companies panic. Governments rush to secure energy. And that panic spreads faster than any tanker ever could. So the Strait of Hormuz isn't just a strategic waterway. It's a pressure point for the entire global economy. A narrow passage where geography, energy, and military power collide. And as long as the world depends on oil flowing through that tiny corridor, the risk will always remain. One miscalculation, one missile, one accident, and the ripple effects could reach every country on Earth, including yours.